Sometimes to build something, you have to destroy something. I never thought the sound of metal scraping against metal could change my life. But that evening, standing in front of my dented car, it did. She stepped out from behind the wheel, holding her keys like they weighed more than her own hands. And with a calm, almost daring smile, she said, "Maybe it's time to break the silence between us." For a second, I forgot about the damage on my car. I forgot about everything really. Because what kind of woman says that after leaving a fresh scar on your fender? Her name was Emma Carter. She lived just 3 houses down from mine. Though for 2 months, I'd only ever seen her from a distance. Late evenings on her porch with a glass of wine. Quiet mornings watering her flowers in jeans and a cardigan. She had that sort of presence you noticed even when you tried not to. I knew she was older, 48, maybe a little more, but she carried herself with a confidence that made age feel irrelevant. And me, I was 29, new to the neighborhood, still figuring out if this move had been a step forward or sideways. That evening, I wasn't sure what surprised me more, the dent in my car or the fact that she was finally speaking to me. Up until then, our only exchanges were polite nods across the street. "I'll pay for the repair," she added, her eyes fixed on mine, as if she wanted me to argue. But not just with money. There was something disarming in the way she said it. Not flirtatious, not careless, more like someone admitting they'd been waiting for an excuse. I shifted awkwardly, brushing my hand through my hair, buying time. "Then how?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Maybe coffee, maybe a real conversation. I'm tired of walking past you like we don't exist in the same world." It was bold, honest, and I didn't know whether to laugh, be annoyed, or thank her. So I did the simplest thing. I nodded. And just like that, the dent on my car turned into the smallest problem I had that night. Emma Carter invited me to her porch, a simple place with 2 chairs and the faint smell of cinnamon drifting from the kitchen. She sat down 2 mugs of coffee, and before I could even take a sip, she leaned back and said, "You've been here a while now, haven't you? 2 months, and we've barely spoken." That silence felt heavier every day. Her words had a weight to them. I realized she wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about herself, about the space she carried inside. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I told her a little about myself. That I worked long shifts, mostly delivery and side jobs. That I moved here for a quieter life to save some money to finally figure out what stability felt like. It wasn't much, but it was the truth. She listened. Really listened like every word mattered. Then she said softly, "You remind me of something I lost a long time ago, a kind of sincerity people don't bother showing anymore." I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments usually make me uneasy, and this one carried more than flattery, carried history. There was something in her eyes behind the warmth that looked like loss. Before I could ask, footsteps echoed on the sidewalk. Mr. Harold Bennett, the neighborhood's self-appointed watchdog, strolled by with his dog, throwing us a look that lasted just a beat too long. "Evening, Emma Carter." "Evening, young man." He called with the sort of grin that made it clear he'd be telling someone about this later. Emma Carter only smiled and whispered once he was gone. "He sees everything, but he understands nothing." I laughed, but inside, I wondered what people would think if they saw us together. A woman nearing 50 and a man not yet 30. People in neighborhoods like this loved to draw their own conclusions. Still, there was no denying the pull I felt. The way she leaned forward slightly when she spoke. The way her hand brushed mine when she reached for the sugar bowl. Small things, but they stayed with me. She didn't say much more about the car. Instead, she said something that struck me deeper. "I've been afraid of silence, Lucas Hayes. Afraid it would turn into walls. And I don't want that anymore." Her honesty left me quiet. Maybe she saw the conflict in my face because she reached out and rested her hand on my wrist. Just a touch, nothing more. But in that touch was more courage than in all the words she had spoken. I should have pulled back. I should have thought about the neighbors, about the whispers, about what people would assume. But I didn't. I stayed still, letting her hand linger. That was when a car pulled up at the curb. A black pickup. A man stepped out tall, polished, confident. He didn't look at me. He looked only at her. and the smile he gave her was the kind of smile that claimed possession. "Evening, Emma Carter," he said, ignoring my presence. "Nathan Brooks," she replied, her tone polite but clipped. Then she turned to me. "Lucas Hayes, don't leave. I'll be just a minute." I stayed, sitting there with her half-finished coffee in front of me, the sound of muffled voices drifting from inside. I didn't know who Nathan Brooks was. Not yet. But in that moment, I realized something. The dent on my car was only the beginning. The real cracks were somewhere else, and I was already stepping into them. The next morning, I found a box on my porch. Inside was a still warm apple pie and a folded note in neat, careful handwriting. For the dent I made and the silence I broke. "Emma Carter." I laughed under my breath. Not many people apologized with pie, and somehow it felt more personal than cash ever could. By the time I carried the box into the kitchen, I realized she wasn't just paying for a repair. She was starting something. I didn't know what yet, but I felt it. That evening, she showed up herself, standing at my door with the kind of expression that told me she had rehearsed it a dozen times. "If you're free," she said, lifting her chin, "maybe you'll share it with me. It's too much for one person." We sat at her kitchen table. The house was warm, the kind of place that held stories in its walls. Family photos, shelves of books, a soft rug that looked older than me. She cut 2 slices of pie, set them down, and asked, "So, Lucas Hayes, why here? Why this neighborhood?" I told her the truth, that I moved after years of chasing work in noisy cities, that I wanted quiet, a chance to rebuild after things didn't turn out the way I planned. I didn't give her all the details. I wasn't ready, but she listened like every piece mattered. When she spoke, her voice softened. "I didn't move here for peace. I stayed here because I was afraid to leave. After my husband passed, I kept telling myself I'd start fresh somewhere new. But then days turned to years, and this street became my prison and my refuge at the same time." There was no drama in her words, just honesty. And that honesty drew me in more than anything else could. Halfway through dessert, the back door opened and a familiar figure stepped inside. Mr. Harold Bennett, carrying a bag of groceries. "Emma Carter, I picked up the things you asked for." He paused when he saw me. "And you have company." He looked at me the way only nosy neighbors can, with curiosity so sharp you could cut bread with it. Before I could answer, Emma Carter smiled easily. "Thank you, Harold Bennett. Leave them on the counter." He lingered, eyeing me, then finally muttered, "Nice to meet you, young man. We look after each other here, you'll see." And with a knowing nod, he shuffled out. Emma Carter chuckled when the door closed. "He means well, but I promise you by tomorrow the entire block will know you had pie with me." I smiled, but I felt the truth in her words. This wasn't just about us anymore. People were already watching. Later, as we stepped outside, the sun was sinking low, turning the street gold. I noticed something on the hood of her car, a photograph tucked under the wiper. I picked it up. It was old, slightly faded. A younger Emma Carter smiling with a man I assumed was her late husband, standing proudly beside the very same car she had dented. I handed it to her gently. For the first time that evening, her face faltered. "I thought I threw this away," she whispered. "Why leave it out here?" I asked. "Because I couldn't let go of him." "Not completely. That car, it's the last piece of him I had left. Damaging. Felt like betrayal and freedom all at once." She slipped the photo into her pocket and straightened her shoulders, her expression shifting back to calm. "I'm sorry you saw that." I shook my head. "Don't be." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked at me, her voice steadier. "Lucas Hayes, I didn't dent your car just by accident. Maybe it was clumsy, but maybe it was also the only way I could push myself to talk to admit that I don't want to keep living behind glass." The porch light flickered on, catching the curve of her smile. It wasn't a flirtatious smile. It was braver than that. And that's when I realized the story was no longer about a car. It was about a woman trying to step out of her past and me deciding whether I was strong enough to stand beside her. Nathan Brooks arrived like a storm dressed in confidence. It was the following weekend and Emma Carter had invited a few neighbors over for drinks in her backyard. I wasn't sure if I should go. After all, I was the youngest man on the street by at least a decade. But she insisted. If people are going to talk, she'd said with a half-smile, let them talk with something real to look at. At first, it was light-hearted. Mrs. Evelyn Moore brought her famous lemonade. Mr. Harold Bennett was telling stories everyone had heard before, and Emma Carter moved among them like the quiet center of it all. Then Nathan Brooks showed up. He was in his mid-30s, sharp suit even on a Saturday, the kind of man who always looked like he was heading to a meeting where everyone would agree with him. His truck pulled in, black and polished, the opposite of my dented sedan. "Evening, Emma Carter," he said, kissing her cheek with the ease of someone who thought he had the right. Then his eyes landed on me. "And this must be the new neighbor, Lucas Hayes," Emma Carter introduced, but her tone had a clipped edge to it. Nathan Brooks extended a hand, and I shook it, but his grip lingered just a fraction too long. A silent message. "You don't belong here." He made sure everyone heard him when he added, "Emma Carter deserves company that understands her world. Someone established. You know how it is." The laughter that followed was forced, but it stung. I wanted to snap back, but Emma Carter saved me. She placed a hand on my arm and said calmly, "Lucas Hayes understands more than you think, Nathan Brooks." It silenced the circle for a moment, and Nathan Brooks's jaw tightened. The evening wound down, neighbors drifting home, but I could feel Nathan Brooks's eyes on me like a shadow that wouldn't leave. Later, as the backyard lights dimmed, Emma Carter asked me to help her in the garage. "There are boxes I can't lift alone," she explained, though her voice carried something unspoken. The garage smelled of dust and old oil, cardboard boxes stacked against the wall, a bicycle that hadn't been touched in years, and shelves cluttered with forgotten tools. She handed me a flashlight, and for a while we worked in silence, moving boxes, brushing off cobwebs. Then she stopped and rested her hand on a dusty trunk. "This was his," she said softly. "My husband's. I've never been able to open it." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw not the confident woman from across the street, but someone fragile. Someone carrying weight she didn't want to bear alone. "Do you want me to?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "Not yet. Just don't leave." So I didn't. I stayed close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. Close enough to notice the tremor in her hands. It wasn't romance, not in the way people expect. It was something deeper. A shared silence that felt less like distance and more like connection. When she finally spoke, it was barely audible. "Thank you for not letting him humiliate you tonight." I shrugged. "I didn't have to. You did it for me." That drew the faintest smile. She reached up, brushing dust from her cheek, and her fingers grazed mine as if by accident. Except it didn't feel like an accident. In that dim garage, surrounded by shadows of the past, I realized the fight ahead wasn't about dents on cars or whispers from neighbors. It was about whether Emma Carter and I were strong enough to stand against men like Nathan Brooks and against the fears that lived inside us. When I walked home under the street lights, I knew one thing for sure. This story was only just beginning, and it wasn't going to be simple. The next evening, I found myself back at Emma Carter's garage. She had called earlier, her voice steady, but quieter than usual. "Could you come by? There's something I need to face, and I can't do it alone." When I arrived, the sun was already slipping behind the rooftops, the last gold light spilling across the driveway. The garage door was open, and she was standing there in a soft sweater. Her arms crossed as if bracing against more than just the cool air. Inside, the garage looked the same. Dusty boxes, stacked shelves, the untouched bicycle. But tonight, her focus was on the old sedan parked in the corner. The one she had dented. The one I now knew carried more history than just scratches in the paint. She touched the hood gently like it was skin instead of metal. "This car belonged to my husband," she said, her voice low. "It was the last thing of his I couldn't let go of for years. I polished it, kept it running, even when I didn't need to drive it. It felt like keeping him alive somehow." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. Her hand trembled as it traced the dent. "When I hit it the other day, I told myself it was an accident, but it wasn't. I wanted to break something, Lucas Hayes. I wanted to stop living inside a shrine. She turned to me, eyes glistening in the dim light. And maybe I wanted you to notice because noticing you, it scared me less than pretending I was fine. The silence between us wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, waiting for me to shatter it or hold it carefully. I stepped closer. Emma Carter, you don't owe me explanations, but I'm glad you told me. She gave a faint laugh, shaking her head. You're too young to carry someone else's ghosts. I didn't flinch. I'm not here for ghosts. I'm here because you're alive, and I want to know you, not just the parts you let the neighbors see. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she just looked at me like she was measuring the risk of believing my words. Then she reached out and placed her hand over mine on the hood of the car. The contact was simple, but the weight behind it was immense. I haven't let anyone this close in years, she whispered. Feels wrong and right all at once. I squeezed her hand gently. Maybe that's how you know it matters. Her eyes softened. She stepped back, but not far, and leaned against the car, her arms falling to her sides as if surrendering some invisible burden. Do you know what silence does to a person, Lucas Hayes? It doesn't just keep the world out. Keeps you locked in. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, the pain would shrink. Instead, it grew roots. I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that I understood more than she realized. But the words stuck in my throat, replaced instead by something simpler. I stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, and together we stared at the dented car. The world outside moved on. Voices of children playing down the street. The hum of a lawn mower fading in the distance. But in that garage it was just us. Just two people standing at the edge of something neither of us had planned. After a long silence, she looked at me again. Lucas Hayes, if you walk away now, I'll understand. I won't blame you, but if you stay, know that this won't be easy. Nathan Brooks won't stop. The neighbors will talk. And I can't promise I won't stumble along the way. Her honesty hit me harder than any warning could. I felt the pull of fear, the age gap, the judgment, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But I also felt something else. The certainty that if I left, I'd regret it. I'm not going anywhere, I said quietly. She exhaled almost like she'd been holding that breath for years. Then, in a gesture so small it could have been missed, she leaned her forehead against my shoulder. No kiss, no dramatic embrace, just closeness. Real, unpolished, fragile. I didn't move. I let her rest there, my hand brushing lightly against hers. It was enough, more than enough. But outside, headlights swept across the driveway. A car slowing down then stopping. I didn't need to see who it was. I already knew Nathan Brooks. Emma Carter lifted her head, her expression tightening. He won't understand, she murmured. Then maybe it's time he doesn't have to, I replied. She looked at me, eyes searching mine for strength. And in that moment, I realized we weren't just breaking her silence anymore. We were declaring something neither of us could hide much longer. Nathan Brooks didn't just show up. He staged an arrival. Saturday evening, the neighborhood gathered in Emma Carter's backyard for a small charity raffle she hosted every spring. String lights hung between the trees. The grill smoked gently, and everyone wore the pleasant expression people practice when they want to be seen as kind. I came early to help set tables. Emma Carter thanked me with a look that held more steadiness than nerves. But I could feel the tremor beneath it. Nathan Brooks arrived last. Crisp shirt, polished manners, the kind of smile that assumes applause. He made a point of greeting everyone by name, then drifted toward Emma Carter and me like gravity had chosen his side. Emma Carter, he said just loud enough for the circle to hear. I hope you won't mind if I say a few words later about tradition. He glanced at me only then as if discovering a chair out of place. Evening he took the center when the raffle started. Spoke about community, about how Emma Carter's late husband used to run the event, about responsibility and appearances. Each sentence dipped in honey before it cut. Some of us, he added lightly, are still learning what belongs here and what doesn't. Laughter scattered like coins tossed on a table. I could have kept silent, let it pass. But Emma Carter's shoulders tightened, small, almost invisible, except to someone standing close. I stepped forward before I knew what I was going to say. My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. I'm new. I am learning, but I know this. I wouldn't be here without her. She rebuilt more than this porch. She rebuilt people. A hush spread. Nathan Brooks's smile thinned. And what exactly are you rebuilding, Lucas Hayes? Courage, I said. The kind that admits the past and still chooses tomorrow. I turned to Emma Carter then, not for permission, but for truth. I don't regret the dent in my car. It brought me to the only conversation that mattered. Mr. Harold Bennett cleared his throat like a drum roll. Mrs. Evelyn Moore folded her arms and nodded to no one in particular. Nathan Brooks looked around, counting allies. He found enough to risk the next line. A woman deserves an equal, not a project. Emma Carter stepped closer to me, her hand brushing mine before it found its courage at my wrist. I am not anyone's project, she said clearly, and I won't be measured by a man's comfort. She faced the neighbors, the string lights catching the calm in her eyes. I kept quiet for years because grief taught me how. Silence kept things neat. It also kept me small. I dented that car because I needed to stop worshiping a memory. I invited Lucas Hayes because I needed to start living a life. No one moved. Somewhere a fork clinked against a plate. A child laughed in the next yard and the sound felt almost holy. Nathan Brooks tried to recover. Emma Carter, I'm only concerned. People talk. Let them, she said. They will whether I hide or not. Then softer to me. I'm not hiding. The words reached into my chest and took hold of something I didn't know how to name. I spoke before fear could bargain me down. Neither am I. It didn't turn into applause or fireworks. It turned into the quieter kind of change, the line that redraws itself and refuses to move back. Mrs. Evelyn Moore came first, setting her plate down and offering Emma Carter a steady look. Proud of you, she said, and then to me. Take care of her by telling the truth even when it's heavy. Mr. Harold Bennett nodded a little watery around the eyes, muttering something about good apples and decent men. A few neighbors drifted closer. A few drifted away. That felt honest. Nathan Brooks exhaled through his nose. You're making a mistake, he said to Emma Carter like a doctor with a terminal diagnosis. Maybe, she replied, but it will be mine. He left without slamming anything, but the space he vacated felt like a door finally closing. The raffle resumed, but the air had changed texture. When it ended, people stacked chairs, carried plates, made ordinary chatter that sounded a little kinder. Later, on the porch steps, Emma Carter and I shared the last of the lemonade. The night had settled, the lights hummed softly, and the old sedan sat at the edge of the driveway like a retired witness. She leaned her shoulder against mine. Not for show, not for anyone's verdict, just because it felt right. I used to think silence protected me, she said. It only kept the worst parts echoing. I used to think approval mattered more than peace, I answered. It only made me smaller. She looked at me, really looked the way people do when they decide to remember a face. Tell me you won't run when it gets difficult. I can't promise the world will be kind, I said. But I can promise I'll stand where I said I would. She smiled, tired, relieved, a little astonished. Then we start here. She reached into her pocket and placed a small scuffed key fob in my palm. Keep it, not as a token, as a reminder that metal can bend and still carry you forward. I closed my fingers around it and felt the weight of more than plastic. Across the lawn, wind moved the lights so they shivered like small stars. Neighbors' doors shut one by one. Night gathered itself. When I finally walked home, the dent on my car caught a thin ribbon of moonlight, curved and imperfect, like handwriting across a page. I didn't want to erase it anymore. Some marks don't ruin a thing. They tell the truth about what it survived. At my door, I paused and looked back. Emma Carter stood in her doorway watching. She didn't wave. I didn't either. We didn't need signals. We had said enough. And still, as the quiet settled, a thought moved through me with the certainty of weather. The loudest crowd had gone home. But the hardest part wasn't noise. It was the hush after it. The choices no one would see. The days that would test whether tonight was a vow or a moment. She had told me once that silence can build walls. I understood now that it can also hold a question.